The first time Karen ended up in handcuffs outside my house, it didn't even feel real. Watching the president of our HOA scream about bylaws while deputies shoved her into the back of a cruiser. Well, it was the kind of scene you expect in a dark comedy, not in your quiet cul-de-sac. And yet, that was exactly where her obsession had taken us, straight from fake warrants to felony charges in the span of a few chaotic weeks. I guess I should start at the beginning. I live on the edge of a suburban neighborhood in Franklin, Tennessee. My property isn't technically part of the HOA, but it borders their streets, which meant I was still close enough to be a target. I'd put up a steel gate a couple of years back, one of those automated ones with warning signs posted clearly. After a few people tried forcing it open, I had an electrician install a legal city-permitted deterrent system. It wasn't lethal, just a strong zap if someone tampered with the latch. Most folks saw the signs and stayed away. Most folks weren't Karen Matthews. Karen strutted through life like she'd been elected governor of our block. Clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, always quoting HOA bylaws like they were scripture. The problem was, I wasn't in her jurisdiction, and she hated that. Hated my independence, hated my gate. Hated that every time she told me to show up at her HOA meetings, I told her no. One morning, she came charging across the cul-de-sac, red-faced, waving a crumpled sheet of paper. She smacked it against my gate like she was serving me with a federal warrant and barked, "You have 48 hours to comply." I leaned against the post, sipped my coffee, and told her, "Funny warrants usually come with a badge, not a coupon stapled on top." Her jaw locked. Her nostrils flared, and she launched into this rant about safety hazards and aesthetics. According to her, my gate and shed were a menace, and my refusal to bow down to her power was some kind of crime. And then, because Karen believed the laws of physics didn't apply to her, she reached for the latch. The second her fingers closed on the cold steel, there was a crackle, a shriek that sounded half banshee, half dying car alarm, and she flew back like a cartoon character. Her fake warrant fluttered to the ground. The two HOA lackeys behind her gasped. I felt strangely calm. For once, it wasn't just me telling her no. Reality had. I thought maybe that would be enough to scare her into retreat. I was wrong. The very next morning, a minivan rolled into my driveway. Out stepped Karen again, hair still a little frizzed from the shock, with two so-called security guards. They looked like mall cops on lunch break, all mirrored sunglasses and fake authority. She pointed at me like a general at war. "That's him. That's the man who assaulted me with his illegal death trap." The guards puffed up their chests, demanding I open the gate. One even flashed a laminated HOA badge with a cartoon sun on it. I almost spit my coffee. "Nice badge," I said. "What do you do with the handcuffs? Keep them next to the bake sale lemonade stand." They didn't like that, but Karen doubled down, shrieking about lawsuits demanding they arrest me. What she didn't know was that after her little shock treatment, I'd already called the sheriff. A deputy laughed outright when I described her fake warrant and told me to film everything if she tried again. So that's exactly what I did. I pulled out my phone, aimed it at Karen and her mall cops, and said, "You're trespassing with two men impersonating officers. Want me to call the sheriff? He'll be here in 15 minutes. The taller guard froze. "Wait, you're not actually under the HOA, I grinned. "Nope, which means right now you're trespassing." They turned, walked back to the van, and left Karen shrieking betrayal in the dust. For a moment I thought maybe she'd finally back off. But that night, Dave, my neighbor, texted me a heads up. Karen was telling people she was filing a criminal complaint accusing me of running some kind of electrified booby trap. That one shook me. I won't lie. Lying in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I actually asked myself if I'd gone too far. Was my gate really worth all this chaos? If the cops believed her story could, I actually get charged. There was a moment I almost decided to shut everything down. Dismantle the gate, let her win just to make it stop. But then I remembered the receipts, the permits, the warnings, the fact that everything I'd done was legal and above board. She wasn't right, she was just louder. And I wasn't about to let volume rewrite reality. So when the deputy came knocking the next day, I was ready. I handed over the electrician's paperwork, the city permits, even the footage of Karen shocking herself despite the big red signs. The deputy chuckled, closed his notebook, and said, "Your system is legal, sir. I'll be filing this under self-inflicted consequences." Then he smirked, warning that any more false complaints from her would count as harassment of law enforcement. That was the moment I knew Karen wasn't just making noise anymore. She was digging her own grave. Still, she wasn't done. Next, she showed up with a lawyer, Mr. Doyle. Dark suit, fancy folder. Smooth voice. Claimed my gate posed a clear and present danger to the community. Karen stood beside him smirking like she'd just hired the president's personal attorney. Doyle shoved a thick packet through the bars, declaring it a formal notice of intent. I skimmed it. It was garbage. Random statutes copied from who knows where, including a boating dock ordinance. We were nowhere near water. I deadpanned. "Tell me, did Karen type this herself, or was it your paralegal? Because my fifth grader could do better." Doyle's mask cracked. His whole strategy was intimidation through legal-sounding nonsense. But when I pulled out my phone and mentioned I'd already filed for a declaratory judgment with the county clerk, he snapped his folder shut and walked away. Karen screeched, but her so-called lawyer wanted no part of the circus anymore. That's when she turned nasty. Spray paint across my driveway, words like criminal and danger. HOA pamphlets stuffed in my mailbox. Another fake inspection notice taped to my gate. I didn't blow up. I documented everything, called the sheriff. Deputies marched straight to her house, warned her about vandalism charges. I watched from across the street as she stammered excuses, blaming neighborhood kids. They weren't buying it. That night, though, she came back to my gate, pressed against the bars, eyes burning. "You think you've won?" she spat. "I'll shut off your power. I'll make this house worthless. You don't understand who you're dealing with." Her voice shook with something darker than arrogance. It was obsession. And sure enough, the very next morning, my lights flickered and died. I checked my phone. External power supply disconnected. When I looked out the window, my jaw clenched. There was Karen, bolt cutters in hand, grinning beside my utility box, wires dangling. She even waved at me like this was a neighborhood prank. That was the moment she went too far. Cutting live power lines isn't a prank. It's a felony. Within 10 minutes, sirens filled the air. A cruiser, then another, then a utility truck. Deputies stormed around the side of my house and found Karen crouched like a raccoon, sparks still flickering. They ordered her to drop the cutters. She tried to babble about community safety inspections. Nobody listened. They cuffed her on the spot, marched her past a growing crowd of neighbors, her shrieks about warrants drowned out by the sound of cameras recording. You'd think that would end it, but Karen's ego couldn't process defeat. The very next day out on bail, she rallied her HOA board for a protest at the end of my driveway. They waved signs, "Hazard House Down," with death gates. I sat on my porch swing with iced tea and watched. Neighbors recorded, laughed, turned the whole thing into memes online. Karen became a joke, photoshopped with lightning bolts, devil horns, power-hungry. Karen. Her power crumbled faster than her reputation. But she still wasn't done. At 3 in the morning, I woke to a crash so loud it rattled my windows. I ran outside to find Karen's SUV jammed against my gate bumper, mangled wheels spinning. She stumbled out barefoot. Hair-wild hands bleeding from the airbag. She clawed at the steel, screaming, "This is my neighborhood. I'll tear this down, even if it kills me." I backed away, phone to my ear, calling deputies for the 100th time. They arrived fast, pulled her off the gate, cuffed her again. This time, the crowd of pajama-clad neighbors didn't hide behind curtains. They applauded. Actual applause rippled through the street as Karen was shoved into the back of the cruiser, her SUV leaking fluids onto the pavement. A deputy shook his head. "We're done giving her slaps on the wrist. The DA's gonna have a field day." And just like that, it was over. Karen's charges stacked up: felony tampering with utilities vandalism, trespassing, resisting arrest. Her husband filed for separation. Her house went up for sale. The HOA board, desperate to save face, voted her out as president. One day she was queen of the cul-de-sac, the next she was gone. That's how it ended. Karen dethroned her empire of clipboards and fake warrants collapsing around her. And me. I didn't need to gloat, didn't need to celebrate. I just kept living. Because in the end, the best revenge against people like her isn't to destroy them, it's to stand firm while they self-destruct. Lesson learned power built on fear and lies always burns itself out.